And you can't hear me, can you? Oh, no, you can hear me. I see that it's all working. Welcome to MCJ Report number 188. I hope that you're all having a very, very lovely evening, no matter where you are or how you are watching, whether it is on Rumble or YouTube. So why don't you go ahead and put in the comments where you're tuned in from. I like knowing where my audience is located, whether you're from the Socialist Republic of Victoria, somewhere else in Australia, or a country from around the world, because of course MCJ Report is open to all people. That's right, we don't discriminate across our borders. We like to get a big crew together. So go ahead and share the broadcast. Now, if it's your first time you're watching MCJ Report, this is independent media, and I'm your host, Morgan C. Jonas. And of course, on the show, we like to cover topics otherwise either left untouched by the mainstream media, or of course, we like to provide a lot of additional context, because we know for sure that in this day and age, the media is nothing more than, say, 5-second sound bites without any real descriptions or any historical references or anything like that. So we like really getting down to the nitty gritty here on MCJ Report, the nuts and bolts. That's what we like to do. I see a whole bunch of my regular guests here, my regular viewers. There's Harps. How you going? Big Matty, Sharon, DW from the United States. Great to have you here, and we're of course wishing you all the best. I know that you're facing some challenging times over there right now with a Biden administration which is completely out of control, and pardon the pun, but a whole bunch of trumped up charges against, of course, the former president, Donald Trump. Sorry, but I just had to say that. We've got Marty there. Great to see you, Van Presser. Alrighty, so go ahead and give the broadcast a share. Get it out to your networks. Get the word out, ladies and gentlemen, because we've got some interesting things to cover this evening. So a couple of little pointers. Tomorrow night, there's going to be some bonus content. That's right. We will have the one and only Aussie Cossack join us here on MCJ Report. Now, a lot of you follow Aussie Cossack. A lot of you are fans of his content. Now, you might be aware or you might not be that he is actually cooped up right now in the Russian embassy in Sydney. That's right. And he has been for several months. So we're going to have an exclusive interview with AC. We're going to ask him what exactly compelled him to step foot into the Russian embassy. When, if ever, is he planning on leaving? What are his plans? His YouTube channel with over 160,000 followers was recently taken down. A massive blow, of course, to the Aussie Cossack. And also, keep in mind that through his channel, he was monetizing and had paid subscriptions. So YouTube effectively wiping out a big part of the man's income, and that's what I think big tech likes to do when people become influential that they perhaps can't control. So we're going to hear it from the man himself tomorrow night, so make sure that you tune in and tell your friends and family, because it's always, I think, a pretty entertaining discussion when MCJ and AC have a back and forth dialogue. Okay, so also, it's MCJ Report number 188, and we're actually approaching MCJ Report 200. Now, I put this out before, but I am open to doing a live show. That's right. So hiring a venue, setting up sound, lighting, backdrop, a desk, and doing a full live audience show for MCJ Report number 200. But before I commit to doing it, I need to know that I have support from you, from the general public. So I'll be making some posts throughout the next few weeks. So make sure you keep an eye out for my socials, Twitter, Telegram, Facebook, and Instagram. My username is the same across all platforms, Morgan C. Jonas, one word. And provided that I sense that there's plenty of support out there for it, then I'll go ahead and do it. And it will be in Melbourne, but there'll be plenty of notice if anyone would like to travel interstate or travel a few hours to be there. But of course, it depends on you. If you want me to do it, then I'll do it. Simple as that. You want me to do it, I'll do it. And that's just that. Also, on the show tonight, we're going to talk about a whole bunch of things, but the feature topic for this evening will be personal carbon allowances. That's right. Now, we've heard, of course, about carbon limits and carbon credits for various companies from different industries, but we haven't heard all that much about to what degree will the government seek to restrict our carbon footprint, as in us as Australians or Americans or anyone anywhere in the world. Will the government seek to restrict what we do, when and where we do it? Well, we're going to ponder this a little bit later on the show, ladies and gentlemen, because I have a suspicion that there could be something in the works tied into the 2050 net zero agenda, which of course has been adopted by the Australian government, but adopted by governments all over the world that are members of the United Nations, that are, of course, also tied in with the IPCC, the International Panel for Climate Change. Alrighty, anyway, that's what I wanted to say to get started. So we're going to smash through some headlines. So let's get started, shall we, ladies and gentlemen? Alrighty. Some news from the United States. News from Canada. Bearded man smashes women's weightlifting record held by trans lifter. A pro weightlifter entered a women's competition in Canada and broke a record held by a transgender lifter, all while sporting a beard. All right, it goes on to say, the New York Post reports that Avi Silverberg, the head coach for Team Canada powerlifting for more than 10 years, entered last weekend's Heroes Classic tournament in Lethbridge, Alberta, after identifying as a female. Alrighty, so the current record of 124 kilograms was held by a trans athlete by the name of Ann Andres. Alright, so just to make it perfectly clear, somebody who was born a biological male. And it went on to say further that Anne was seen watching Silverberg while volunteering at the event. And this particular person that goes by the name of Anne also held the record for deadlift at 245 kilos. So basically what we see here, ladies and gentlemen, is this individual Avi is trolling the entire organization. You see, this organization over in Canada, they have a policy that they do not require any type of evidence should a competitor identify as a member of the opposite sex. In this case, identify as a female. They don't require documentation. They don't even require the minimum testosterone level documentation. Not that that really counts for anything in the world of sports. Simply affirming one's gender can get one into this competition. So what Avi has done is he's basically trolling the entire organization to illustrate a point that any person, any man, can now enter any woman's competition and smash the records, because it is indeed a fact that on average men are a lot stronger than women. So this particular bloke by the name of Avi, what's his last name? Avi Silverberg. I say, mate, good on you. You've done a good job. You've highlighted what can only be described as complete lunacy. Nobody wants to see blokes in women's sports. The whole idea of equality is that women have their division, men have theirs. And Avi has just come through with a sledgehammer and said, I'm going to take the piss out of everyone. And I think that is the best thing that anyone can do in this particular situation. All right, moving along here. Kansas bans transgender athletes from women's sports. Well, I think that you can chalk this up to people such as Avi for shining a light on the absolute madness that has transpired in women's sports over the years, with biological men dominating all different types of sports, including combat sports, sprinting, swimming, weightlifting, and the list goes on and on and on. So great to see. Also in Indiana, governors have signed bans on gender-affirming care. So the governors have basically said that they don't want to play along with this, and that everything in terms of the transgender movement and the Trans Visibility Week over in the US has gone too far. And now the conservative states, you see, are really, really pushing back and choosing to dig their heels in. So what do you think about this? Do you think we need to see some similar action here in Australia? All right, moving on to China. China sends carrier group off Taiwan coast ahead of US meeting. So this is to be expected, ladies and gentlemen. Generally, whenever Taiwan interacts with any other country on a diplomatic level, China will always respond by sending their military right up to the border of Taiwan in terms of either their airspace or their sea space off their southern or southern western coast. This is basically posturing from a geopolitical perspective. China, of course, sending a message to Taiwan, letting them know that Taiwan can have all the talks they want with foreign diplomats from foreign countries. The Chinese military will be there every single step of the way, as a stark reminder that China will not be dissuaded from ultimately invading Taiwan when the time comes. So this is really what it comes down to with these types of posturing and posing. It's all about demonstrating capability and sending a message of what China will do later down the track. All right, petrol prices ultimately going to rise after OPEC cuts production. Well, that's exactly right. And here's another article headline here that says Australia really, quote, dropped the ball on producing its own oil supply. Drop the ball. That's one way of putting it, ladies and gentlemen, but dropping the ball seems to indicate that some type of sudden change occurred with our oil industry. Actually, it's been a slow burn for several decades, and we can trace it back really to the 80s, but more specifically here in Australia, 1988, whereby much of our economy went through radical deregulation, and that included the oil industry. I'm going to show you a little graph here to illustrate my point, and it's not very big. I'll increase this for the replay. Let me see if I can enlarge it just a bit. All right, so what you're looking at right here is a chart, Australia oil consumption and production barrels per day. And we're particularly going to look at the year 1988. That's when the major deregulation occurred and how our oil industry operated drastically changed after that point. So if we look here, leading up to 1988, what we see is that Australia's oil production met or almost met Australia's consumption needs. So production met consumption, which is what you want. That effectively means that you are an independent sovereign producer of oil and not dependent on foreign countries or foreign investors or foreign speculators or trade wars between other nations or military wars or maritime blockades or anything like that. So after 98, post deregulation, what we see, of course, is, if you look at the line on top, Australia's consumption demands rising every single year, yet our consumption declining every single year. And that is without any doubt due to the deregulation of the industry and the foreign trade agreements signed onto by the Australian government, which in the end, right where we are right now, 2023, has made Australia completely dependent on foreign origins for our oil importation and refinery. Keep in mind that here in Australia, we have shut down all of our refineries, thus putting us in a very vulnerable position whereby any changes in global dynamics can hit consumers when it comes to filling up their tank, and you wake up in the morning and petrol all of a sudden is $2.40 or $2.50, and those prices are projected to rise. So when I see headlines to the effect of we dropped the ball, it's not a matter of dropping the ball. It's been a slow burn that has come to this over several decades, and the only way this can ever change is to repeal all the restrictions, all the moratoriums that we have on resources, exploration, drilling, extraction, because at the end of the day, Australia has such a broad range of natural resources that there is no good reason why we should not be a completely energy independent nation. It's only due to the red tape and international agreements that our government has signed us up to that is essentially choking us day by day. And how do we repeal these agreements? How do we access our resources? How do we get Australia to a position whereby we are not dependent on global oil prices or OPEC prices or the prices set by the OPEC oil producing countries? The government needs to be replaced. For far too long now, we know the government is not fit for purpose, and we must replace this government by any means necessary. And I say that Freedom Party is a great place to start. freedomparty.net.au. Check it out if you want to make a change in this country. Alrighty, moving on to some different news. Australian excess deaths at record highs due to COVID, diabetes and dementia. That's right. So obviously the elephant in the room here is the COVID-19 vaccine. You need to ask yourself the question, of course, why is the government never ever talking about adverse reactions or COVID vaccine related deaths? You know, it's almost as if they're serving in the interests of the shareholders of Big Pharma and they don't want to disrupt the course of business for these companies. You and I know the truth. So Senator Gerard Rennick, in typical fashion, he's done the right thing. He's calling for a legitimate inquiry into the excess mortalities. But when we're seeing here, say in 2022, that there were more than 25,000 deaths than what would have been expected, and nobody's talking about the vaccine or the fact that the vast majority of Australians have taken a vaccine that was only provisionally proved and was the first vaccine of its type to ever be injected into human beings. If people can't see the writing on the wall here, then it might be too late for them. All right. Australia-wide ban of TikTok on government devices announced as senior politicians quit the app. All right, well, this is all very well and good, ladies and gentlemen, and when it comes to TikTok or Facebook or YouTube or Twitter, it's really just a matter of pick your poison. Would you prefer for your personal data to be accessed by China or the United States? Of course, we know, based on the Twitter files, that millions of Twitter users' data was compromised, and the same can be said for TikTok without any shadow of a doubt. So the question is, I suppose, to what extent will banning TikTok on government devices actually improve our national security? I don't think it will. I think this is, the impact on national security, I think, would be negligible at best. The real problem that we have here is that 30% of Australian exports are dependent on the Chinese consumer market, and that for far too long our Australian politicians, via the fraudulent Foreign Investment Review Board, have effectively rubber-stamped the foreign acquisitions of so many of our strategic and foreign assets, including but not limited to farmland, food production industries, mining, airports, energy grids, even islands, and the list goes on and on. So I think this move by the government has effectively been made potentially to try and remain in lockstep with the United States or some of Australia's allies, but the actual net benefit to national security, I'd say, is probably about zero, taking into consideration the degree to which our government has jeopardized our national security over the years. And it's also important to point out that our ADF military data is still being held in a company by the name of Global Switch, which is 49% Chinese owned. And there is a state premier by the name of Dan Andrews who recently took a very secretive trip to China to meet with officials from the Chinese Communist Party with zero accountability and zero oversight. So when you look at the state of play here in Australia, I say that banning TikTok on government devices is a non-issue. These government officials, I believe, can still access TikTok from their personal phones, and that's probably where the real security breaches are taking place, if we're going to get serious about it. Alrighty. Oh, and that's what I just mentioned. Yeah, Global Switch. That's the 49% Chinese-owned company holding our military data. All right, now this is pretty interesting right here. This is from Denmark, but this is the MasterCard website. What we're looking at here is MasterCard seeking to roll out what they refer to as effectively a carbon credit card. That's right. So the credit card, instead of having a credit limit, it has a carbon limit. So any purchase consumers make using this MasterCard will attract a score in terms of a carbon ranking. And once the card hits a certain score for the month, the card will become unusable. It's a way of monitoring and restricting individuals and consumers' carbon footprint for the purpose of saving the planet, right? The declared purpose of saving the planet. But we're going to talk about that a bit more on the show. Alrighty, so that's just about it for there. Alright, little commercial. Shop.mcjreport.com. If you like the show, if you support what I do, head on over just to shop.mcjreport.com. That's the website. You can grab some stickers, you can grab a t-shirt, you can grab an MCJ travel coffee mug buddy so that you can have MCJ Report with you every single day, everywhere you go. And that, I think, is pretty good. So $29.95 plus shipping, and you'll have your very own mug. I'm looking around my desk. I don't have one in front of me. Or you can grab some stickers, just $9.95. Of course, you support the show. And by supporting the show, you also secure the longevity of the show. Of course, a lot of time, effort, and resources goes into this. I also work a full-time job, so I do everything I can to keep MCJ Report on the air. And the more people who support, well, the more I can put into the show. And so that's shop.mcjreport.com. Alrighty, I'm just going to make sure that we're still connected here before I get on to the next segment of the show, which is really going into detail about the so-called personal carbon allowances. I'm just going to check Rumble. Alright, I see that Rumble is connected. That's fantastic. And we're also on YouTube as well. Alrighty, guys. Alright, so just going to take a quick 1 to 2 minute break. Alright, so if you need to go and grab yourself a glass of water or a coffee or a beer or a shot of vodka, hey, do whatever you want to do, alright? It's all about freedom. Go and do it now. I'm going to grab some water. I'll be back in a minute. Back, ladies and gentlemen, back. And I just spared you guys watching another round of Victoria Police beating people up. I mean, I shouldn't laugh, but I mean, I was one of the people getting beaten up, so I think that gives me the right to laugh about it, because at the end of the day, if you're not laughing, you're crying, and if you're not moving forwards, you're moving backwards, and you don't want to cry and you don't want to move backwards, so you may as well move forwards and laugh at your enemies when they try to attack you, and move from strength to strength. And for me, I'll just keep poking the bear, and hopefully the bear bites. So that's the general goal, ladies and gentlemen. Alrighty. Anyway, if you've just tuned in, you're watching MCJ. I just read a comment. You're watching MCJ Report. I'm your host, Morgan C. Jonas. Go ahead and share the broadcast. Get the word out there. We're kicking on to the second part of the show, and I'm gonna get to that right now. Welcome to Paul. Paul just tuned in. Paul said that he just came across a dude wearing a face nappy today at 7-Eleven. Yeah, no, they're still out there. They're absolutely still out there. I've seen a couple lately driving around completely alone in their cars wearing face masks. That's right. In 2023 April, there are still people out there isolating themselves in a vehicle wearing face masks, and there's nothing you can say to these people. One thing COVID-19 really exposed are the hypochondriacs in our society, the germaphobes, and how extremely paranoid some people's personalities are. They could no longer blend in anymore, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, I suppose you have to chuckle about it at the end of the day, and keep keeping on. Alrighty, so anyway, what are we doing here? Alrighty, so, in typical fashion, what I do with MCJ Report, and you probably noticed this, is I do the live broadcast, and then I'll cut out segments of the show. I'll add bells and whistles, I'll add production value, B-roll footage, extra effects, things like that, and upload them during the week. So that's the usual format. So I just wanted to make mention of that. If you're wondering where's the extra footage, etc., it's because it's almost impossible as a one-person show to do everything live. Maybe in the future, somebody will join MCJ Report so that I can just present to you and not worry about operating everything else, because, I've got my keyboard and my mouse here, I do everything. But until that time happens, obviously I'll need to really put the value in the post-production. So I just wanted to explain that, just a little bit of a, behind the scenes functional thing with MCJ Report, just so you sort of know, what goes on from my end. Alrighty. So what are we talking about here? Personal carbon allowance. What is the government up to? Alrighty, so ladies and gentlemen, what we're talking about here is effectively a program that coincides with the government's aggressive strategy for achieving what they refer to as net zero by 2050. So in this personal carbon allowance, basically what it is a digitally monitored program to control individuals' carbon footprint. Okay, so this type of program was first theorized in the late 90s by an individual by the name of David Fleming. and he was an environmental economist from the United Kingdom. But of course, as you can probably imagine, the program has since been revised, added to, revolutionized, if you want to refer to it as that, via the likes of the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. Now, we know that here in Australia, we have an aggressive roadmap to net zero by 2050, especially under the Anthony Albanese federal government, which of course is working closely with state and territory governments. And we're aware that one of the key measures employed by the government is to greatly compel a range of different companies from a variety of industries to reduce their carbon emissions by placing carbon limits on companies and granting companies the capability to buy and sell what's referred to as carbon credits, right? So if a company is below their carbon total amount, their total limit, they can sell their credits to a different company that seeks to use more carbon. And of course, the additional costs involved in the end are passed on to the people they're always passed on to, the consumers, and those who are ultimately affected the most are working class, middle class families. So we've seen this attempt to basically drastically reduce the carbon emissions from businesses. But what we haven't heard much of is to what extent will the government seek to compel private individuals to reduce their carbon emissions. So this is what we're talking about right here via means of a personal carbon allowance. So the way it works, ladies and gentlemen, is individuals will effectively be granted a total carbon limit for the year. So to give you a bit of an idea of how it might work, as it stands at the moment, here in Australia, the average individual emits roughly the equivalent of 15 tons of carbon per year. Now, the so-called global climate experts from the IPCC and other organizations such as Climate Work, which is heavily backed by George Soros, have strongly recommended to the likes of the United Nations and the World Economic Forum that all human beings on Earth should only be emitting a total of 2 tons. So 2 tons of carbon emissions per year. So here in Australia, that would represent a reduction of 13 tons per person per year. And the figures for the United States in terms of usage are quite similar as well. Now, there's been a few trials around the world. A few countries have actually attempted to roll this type of a system out, including but not limited to the United Kingdom, China, Canada, and the Netherlands. And it's also important to point out that the Australian government has expressed interest in implementing this type of plan, or this type of agenda for reducing carbon emissions. So we need to, really be asking ourselves the question here: what would it look like in a scenario whereby Australians had limitations placed on the degree to how many carbons one can be responsible for, or to curtail one's carbon footprint? How will such an operation be monitored? Well, we see some credit cards getting rolled out around the world which have carbon limitations. MasterCard is an example. So as opposed to having a credit limit, one has a carbon limit, and should one hit that carbon limit, the credit card will be cut off. We also see various apps being developed and pushed by the World Economic Forum for the purpose of monitoring individual carbon emissions. We also see airlines encouraging passengers to purchase plane tickets with a reduced carbon footprint. And of course, we start to draw some dots, and we have to ponder and ask ourselves the question whether or not the rolling out of 15-minute cities could be tied into perhaps this program known as personal carbon allowance. And if so, what exactly would that look like? Because for individuals to drastically reduce their quote carbon footprint, that would really require curtailing how we live, where we travel, and what we do. So one of the most effective means to drastically bring those carbon emissions down would of course be for everybody in society to never travel more than 15 minutes from their house. So where do you think this is all heading, ladies and gentlemen? Do you think we'll see this rolled out here in Australia? I think that we may. It's probably important to, I don't want to say raise the alarm bells, but to be aware of what's going on. It's important to point out that collectively individuals emit more carbon emissions than industry. So it makes logical sense that at one point or another, the government will try to implement means for individuals monitoring their carbon usage. And the only way for the government to achieve this type of objective is to have all carbon footprints from individuals' habits digitized in a centralized database. There's no other way. So at first, the government may introduce a voluntary app, and perhaps such measures may become mandatory in the future. It wouldn't be the first time the government claimed that something would be voluntary, which ended up becoming mandatory. So the question that you may be asking yourself at home is there anything that we can do? Well, once again, speak to your friends, speak to your family. This is not coming out of nowhere. This has actually been cooking for a couple of decades now, starting in the UK and shifting across to the likes of the World Economic Forum. And if this goes ahead, it is concerning to think about what life may be. What happens if an individual was to, say, exceed their carbon limits? Would they be charged per ton of carbon they produced? And if they were charged, how much would they be charged? Or would it be a system like what we see in corporate Australia, where credits can be traded and exchanged effectively on a stock market? I mean, if indeed our carbon emissions are reduced to 2 tons per month, what that effectively would mean, if I could give a practical example, is that say you book a trip to Bali, a plane trip, you would have used 20% of your quota for the entire year on one single trip. So forget about traveling, forget about even going on road trips, forget about, say, purchasing certain goods and services that you've worked hard for. And we also have to think about how such a program would be potentially compatible with our human rights. Now, I'm saying that in jest. I don't believe such a program could be compatible with our human rights. Of course, the right to privacy is a fundamental human right. Movement, and everybody has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And such a program, such as personal carbon allowances, would most definitely impede our capability to live a free life with the human rights of which we are entitled to. So definitely some political hurdles to get through, but I think if we've learned anything from COVID-19, the government is willing to be brazen and will do anything within their power to carry out whatever agenda it happens to be that they are dedicated to at the time. So now probably a better question is, what can we do about it? So yes, spread awareness, speak to your friends, speak to your family. But at the core of this operation, we need to remember is the digital centralized aspect of keeping tabs on all human beings' habits. All right, so if you don't want the government to do that, then you need to advocate in the strongest possible terms for the use of cash. Keep cash alive. Okay, the government can't monitor your so-called carbon footprint if you're using cash. And we know, of course, that cash is under attack. So now is the time for all Australians, anybody that cares about freedom, stop using your cards, stop tapping your phone. Take cash out from the bank, put pressure on the banks, take all your cash out, only use cash Do not offer up your habits, where you go, what you do, and when you do these things. Pay in cash. Also, I think a great maneuver for sliding through this potentially insidious agenda is to bring back bartering. Why not? You know, you give me a steak and I'll give you a bag of rice. You give me a bicycle and I'll give you a bunch of bricks, or whatever the case may be. So I think that we need to go old school again, ladies and gentlemen, because if I'm getting charged so-called, if I'm having my carbon limit reduced every time I go to the supermarket to buy a steak, well, guess what? I'm not going to the supermarket. I'm going hunting. I'm going out. I'm finding my own food. I don't want the government knowing what food I buy, when I buy it, and then punishing me simply for living a life that all Australians are entitled to live, which is, of course, a free life. Remember, in our national anthem, we are young and free, and I don't care whether it's Anthony Albanese or Daniel Andrews. Nobody's taking our freedom away from us, all right? We've given too much already, ladies and gentlemen. We gave up our guns. What a massive mistake that was. But this very soon will be the final frontier. So roll your sleeves up, get ready for the fight. Head on over to www.freedomparty.net.au, become a member, and keep cash alive. And we must collectively fight for the freedom of future generations. I'm ready. I'm excited. I'm not scared. I'm not concerned. We know the government will try all sorts of things. That was proven during COVID. So stay positive and let's just roll our sleeves up and get back to work. All right, cool. All right, and we got 114 people watching. So this just about brings us to the end of the show, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to do some Q&A. I'm glad that you guys are with me. What do you think? What do you think about the personal carbon allowance? Do you think that it's a good idea? Of course you don't. If you thought it was a good idea, you wouldn't be watching MCJ Report. Let's face it. Yeah. So that's that, ladies and gentlemen. So if you have any comments, go ahead and put it in the comment section. Ask me questions. I am here to answer questions. Alrighty. So. Also, just before we wrap this up as well, MCJ reports are active. I'd like to actually thank all the MCJ members out there. Thank you for supporting the show. You are the reason why I can do this show. So MCJ Report, of course, takes a lot of time, a lot of planning, a lot of resources. It's very difficult. I do work full time, so of course I would like to do MCJ Report full time at one stage, God willing, if the support is out there. So to all the viewers who watch, thank you so much. It means so much to me that you tune in and watch MCJ Report. And there's no obligation to become a member, of course. No obligation, especially if you're going through a difficult time. The last thing I would want you doing is spending your money on MCJ Report. But I would like to make a special mention to the members. Thank you very much for contributing financially. You're the reason why the show is actually still here, still up and running. And if you're not a member, if you'd like to support the show, you can do so from $5 a month. Just head on over to mcjreport.com, click on the membership tab up along the top, and then you can sign up there, and members get members only emails, few perks. There's going to be some members events, so you can connect with members from your local community that are also part of MCJ Report. So we're building a bit of a community here, and for the show to survive and to secure longevity, of course, it relies on your support. I don't have any billionaires backing me or anything like that. I don't have any corporations giving me any money whatsoever. And that's the way I want it, because I want to be independent and be answerable only to you. I don't want to be answerable to some billionaire, right? And some of you know, based on my history, if I wanted to be, I could have made some different decisions. And if you know the reference, put it in the comments. I'm not going to say anything else. That's in the past. But I am independent. I'm only answerable to you. And MCJ Report membership is made up of a series of people that contribute small amounts, mostly $5 a month. And I want to be answerable only to you and no one else. So if you want to support, go to mcjreport.com and become a member today. That being said, who's got the first question? I feel like Dana White at a press conference. Put in the comments if you know the reference. No worries. I'll just chuck it in the comments there. All right, just casually sitting here waiting for the first comment. Thank you to Martard. Martard just chipped in some cash there, mate. You're an absolute legend. Thank you very much. Sharon says, come down to Hastings on the 16th of April for Forest of the Fallen. Yeah, Sharon, you've got my mobile number. Can you text me the details? And thank you to Martard. And you're a good man. Much appreciated. All right, so if anyone has any questions, go ahead and put it in the comment section. Let's see. I've opened up Restream. There's Harps. How you doing? Harps says stay free. Absolutely. We're going to stay free no matter what. Harps says that, we're going soon. Yeah, that's exactly right. All right, so let's see. Just making sure that YouTube is connected. All right, I'm just having a read through the comments right here, ladies and gentlemen. There's Marianne there. There's Harps. You're a funny man. There's Judith. Great to see you there. There's Penny. Their eyes are painted on, says Penny. Yeah, I understand completely what you're saying. What about the increase in immigration and the cost of housing? Oh, that's such a big question. I don't even, where do I even start? So immigration, yeah. So the federal government has increased immigration, and they're looking to increase either 457 visas or the equivalent of 457 visas to fill shortages in our workforces, including but not limited to the health and medical industry and the police. All right. So my major objection is that people who are fired for not taking the vaccine have not been reinstated and look like they're going to be thrown on the scrap heap. Okay, so obviously that's what we were fighting for, simply to be treated as human beings, not subject to whether or not we decided to take a certain drug. So I think that's very concerning. And of course, with inflation and interest rates going the way they are, putting more pressure on our economy with more people is only, I suppose, going to create a supply shortage of housing. All right, if you happen to be a renter, or if you're looking for a rental right now, you would know that prices here in Melbourne, and no doubt in Sydney and around Australia, are up more than 30% in a lot of areas, and in some cases, even more than that. So what we're seeing is a cost of living crisis whereby to get by in this country, people will have no choice but to be on a dual income. I don't see anyone really being able to survive in this country earning less than, $150,000, $160,000 a year as either a single income or a combined income. And with the dollar going the way it's going, it is concerning to think about what the future holds. But just like what I've been saying, be smart with your money, try to put money away, be resourceful. And I'm a big advocate of growing your own veggies and hunting your own food. And I think that we all really need to think about how we can all become more independent. Maybe that would unfortunately mean seeking some additional forms of earning income outside of your regular work, or thinking outside of the square. Maybe you can buy stuff. Basic things. For example, if you have basic, say, handyman skills, sanding, polishing, you can go and find some, say, really cheap tables, furniture, Facebook Marketplace, etc. Give it a sand, give it a polish, whack on your margin, go and sell it, and maybe you can earn an extra couple $100 a week, which could really make a massive difference. That's just one little example off the top of my head, but there's so many little things that you can do. And, Yeah, I'm actually a big supporter of recycling and upcycling. I don't like all the consumerism and flooding our country with, one container load of crap after another. So anyway, there's Harps there. There's Lunabelle. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Health industry skills mandates. That's right. Yeah. All right. Let me just go to YouTube, because YouTube is actually, there's always like a small crowd watching on YouTube. For whatever reason, my YouTube channel never really took off. But I can see some people on YouTube. So welcome everyone on YouTube. I see you now. There's Kamal, Creekers, DML saying ScoMo's good at pretending mandatory things don't exist. You're so right. There's the I am me. Yeah, thanks for everyone on YouTube as well. It's great that you guys are there. But Rumble really is the place to be these days. All right, if anyone has any questions for me, go ahead and put it in the comments. I'll do my best to answer. And yeah, anything that you want to know. In fact, nothing's off limits. Whatever you want to know, don't hold back. Just ask it. There's a good 116 of you on Rumble and a good 20 of you on YouTube. So whatever you're thinking, just if you haven't subscribed, by the way, then go ahead and subscribe. That's another thing. So make sure that you subscribe. Click the notification bell. Tomorrow night we're going to have the Aussie Cossack on. Water Sprinkle says, how were 650,000 people properly screened? Got no idea. Van Pressa says, in Townsville, many people are able to afford rent but can't find anything available. Yeah. And of course, like, when, the real answer to solving the problem in regards to carbon restrictions and carbon credits is nuclear energy production, right? No carbon emissions, so that should satisfy all the environmentalists. The technology has improved dramatically, so it is safe now. And I know that some of you got a bit grumpy at me for supporting nuclear energy, but I'd like to think that we can have some disagreements but still get along. And the affordable nature of nuclear energy is just something that can propel businesses forward. But of course, when it comes to the carbon restrictions and net zero, it's not actually about carbon restrictions and saving the planet. If it was, nuclear would be at the forefront of the discussion. So what is it? It's more corporatism, I think. I think we're moving towards a very digitized world. Our privacy rights are being eroded by the day. And just like COVID-19, the climate change narrative is focused on a big invisible enemy that no one can see, that has the capability to strike at any time and can wipe out the world if it so chooses to. So very, very similar notion. It requires collaboration, everybody to trust the science and to cooperate. And anyone doing the wrong thing, well, what you need to do is really simple. You get your phone, you dial 000, you call the police, and you rat on your neighbor, right? So I think that we're going to see stuff like that as well. All right, what else do we have here? Living says China continues to open more and more nuclear power stations. That's right, because China, the Chinese government, right, for all their flaws, they're not looking to bankrupt their country. Yeah, well, if you want to keep cash alive, all right, the best thing that you can do is always use cash. Tell your friends to use cash, make withdrawals from the ATM, and keep it in circulation. Thank you, OMD. That's right. And a few weeks ago, I actually did a little presentation on cost of living and nuclear energy. And I know that some of you are not fans of that, but it made me a little bit, I don't know if the right word is sad, but maybe a little bit disgruntled. There were a couple of followers who actually sent me a message and said, Morgan, I cannot accept your stance on nuclear energy. I'm going to unsubscribe. I'm never going to follow you. I'm never going to watch you again. And I thought to myself, that's pretty sad. After years of producing content and everything that I've done here on the show, for somebody to simply stop watching me because of one little disagreement. What do you think that's about, ladies and gentlemen? Why is it that some people in the world, as soon as they realize that somebody they're interacting with does not share 100% of their views, then that's it. You're the bad guy. The relationship needs to be cut off. Oh no, you've lost me. I'm gone forever. Put in the comments, what do you think causes some people to develop these types of brains, to have that type of outlook on the world? I think that it sucks. And if you don't like nuclear energy, I respect your decision, but I will try to change your mind. I'm a big fan, especially because we have so much uranium. I say, you know what? I want Australia to be a superpower. I want Australia to be fierce and to be feared by anybody, any other country that even thinks for a second about messing with Australia. I want Australia to have long-range missiles. I want Australia to have an arsenal of the latest and greatest weapons. That's what I want for Australia. All right, so going to Judy. How can old people contribute to parallel self-sufficient type society? They can do bits, but what use to others except child sitting? Contribute to parallel self-sufficient. You know, I think just getting the word out there, you know, using cash is a great one. If you've got kids or grandkids, spend as much time with them as you can. You know, at the end of the day, we want children to be hearing stories from grandparents, not from drag queens. Penny, you share veggie seeds with your friends, trying to set up food swap in the UK country town. Oh, good. Are you from the UK yourself? And everyone in the chat, where are you tuned in from? Let me know. I really like knowing where people are tuned in from. I'm tuned in from Melbourne, Victoria. To be specific, I'm on the Mornington Peninsula. So to all the haters out there, if you're out there, you know, come and get me. So where are you tuned in from? Let me know. There's AW4A, someone who can't agree to disagree without having a tantrum. Isn't a viewer having not a Freedom Party member suited to another? Yeah, well, I think so as well. I'm not gonna lie, it was all right. It was a little bit upsetting. I'm like, you serious? One disagreement and that's it. It's over. Who here has ever had that experience with a friend? You've had a disagreement and then the friend just walked out of your life. Has that ever happened to you? Put that in the comments. You know, one of the beautiful things about life is that we don't all have the same brain. This is not North Korea yet. Melbourne, Frankston, yeah, Sharon is just up the road from me. Elders can be there for advice and wisdom. Yeah, that's perfect. Yes. To the elders of Australia, spend time with your kids and your grandkids and deprogram the agendas that they're learning in school. Look them dead in the eyes and say, there's only two genders. You got male, female, and drag queens do not belong in front of children. Say it loud, say it proud. Living says you've been watching for 3 years. Well, 3 years and you're still not sick of me. That's fantastic. WA, all the way. Here's a fun fact about me. I've never been to Western Australia, but I want to go. It looks beautiful. I'd love to go, and maybe I should go soon because if the personal carbon allowance is coming, then it might be hard to travel great distances. Yeah, that's right. Like, the Energy Minister, Chris Bowen, who is not very bright, he referenced the bombing of Hiroshima in Japan in World War II in response to a pro-nuclear argument. So Chris Bowen basically, in his mind, considered that the bombing of Hiroshima is evidence that nuclear energy should not exist. He doesn't seem to understand the basic concept of uranium enrichment and the processes that are required for the development of weapons as opposed to the development of energy. He's just, I mean, the nufties that we have in Parliament, it really makes you sit back, scratch your head and think to yourself, mostly the people in Parliament, they shouldn't be there. They're not smart, they're not insightful, they've never had a real job. Most of them, not all, there's a few exceptions. Of course, there's a few exceptions. I'll be stopped at yeah. So, Marty, is it Marty or Martard? What is it with Mark McGowan seeking to implement border measures for the Western Australian border? I've heard that they want to check people's cars for drugs. I mean, this isn't like crossing from Mexico to Los Angeles. Mark McGowan really seems to think that he's in control of his own little country. And the man needs to be put in his place. And of course he looks up to Dan Andrews. I know that he's off to China. And why not? Anthony Albanese won't do anything. Anthony Albanese will say, off you go, have fun. Make sure that you travel first class, Marky boy. Once these people, these psychopaths, have access to the public purse, they just go on an absolute spending spree. Because why wouldn't they? It's other people's money. They don't care how much of our money they waste. These people are the worst of the worst. Yeah. Anyway, I think I'm going to call it a night, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. Very, very much appreciated. Again, if you'd like to support the show, it's mcjreport.com. You just go ahead and click on the membership tab and you can support from $5 a month. All right, it's not worth it at the end of the day. We're going to keep forging our path forward. I've still got the party intact, Freedom Party of Victoria, so we're going to stay active, not going anywhere. And I'm just excited for the next battle. I'm just sitting here like, wake me up when the war begins. But no, I'm preparing, I'm mobilizing, doing everything that you would expect me to be doing. And in the meantime, God bless you, happy Easter, and I'll catch you next time on MCJ Report.
Mm-hmm.